What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our weekly course breakdown. This time we've got the AT&T Byron Nelson in TPC Craig Ranch, a place where we typically see fireworks. KH Lee, your back-to-back champion, looking to go after a three-peat here in 2023. But a few changes to the setup this time around, and perhaps with slightly different weather going into this year, we might see a slightly harder course this time around. So a lot to go through. We're going to make sure you know everything you need to about TPC Craig Ranch to go out there, make those outright bets, make your DFS plays of the week, and by the end, you're going to be an expert of all things to expect. We'll go hole by hole, go through our key stats for analysis, and our comp courses that I'll be using to identify some of my top plays of the week and my exposure on both ends. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing rocking. So a few differences for this year's tournament. So like I said, a par 71 this time instead of that par 72, and it's hole number 12 that is changed. Rather than a 550-yard par 5, you're looking at about 480, 490-yard par 4 this time. It's going to be one of the more difficult holes on property. So even though that hole might play a huge difference in terms of the scoring, overall, you're still looking at a birdie fest, right? You've got a ton of short holes. Some of the par 3s can be a little bit beefy, but the par 5s, the three of them are still going to be extremely scoreable. And then those par 4s, there's going to be a lot of wedge holes left. So you're going to see something like 20, maybe 22 under par end up winning this year. So just really a cosmetic change when it comes to some of the leaderboards. Maybe the PGA Tour, felt that they needed to make this quote unquote more difficult, and that was their backwards way of going out there and doing so. Either way, though, still a Tom Weiskopf design. A par 71 now that is 7,414 yards. So for a par 72, I would say that was right around tour average. So now that it is a par 71, maybe it's slightly longer than your average tour course. But over the first 2 years, driving distance did not play a huge factor when it came to your winning score. The greens are a little bit larger than usual. They're right around 6,800 square foot. And given how receptive this course was, the first and second version, you had a ton of greens hit. In fact, one of the better green regulation averages that we had on all the PGA Tour at 72.2%. So despite it being about 7,400 yards, guys had no problems keeping their ball in play, both into greens and also off the tee. So the driving accuracy was also above your tour average at 66.2%. A lot of that because of how wide the landing areas are, but also because of how receptive it was there in 2021. And then last year when KH Lee won as well. The scoring average was 2.8 under par. One of the easiest courses, actually I believe the easiest scoring average of any course on the PGA Tour last year. And even with the change right down to a par 71, it's still going to play about 1.8 to maybe even 2 strokes under par. Something to consider is that you're not just adding one to the score, you're also subtracting 60 yards off of hole number 12. So that is going to make that hole, at least in terms of your raw score, easier, right, than it was over the first 2 years. So that's also something to consider when you're looking at the average score. Something I want to point out, though, is the weather here in 2023. I mentioned that it was a little bit receptive there the first 2 years. Well, it's going to be the same thing this time around. There are severe thunderstorms going through the McKinney, Texas area as we speak, actually, while I'm making this video. And then over the next 5-6 days, there are going to be severe thunderstorms for 5 of those 6 days. So not only are we looking at likely precipitation for the entire golf tournament, but also potential delays. So you might see this tournament finishing up on a Monday. It might be super late on Sunday because of some of the delays that are likely to happen. But either way, we're looking at a weird weather week, something that we're going to have to track going up until lock. But the one thing I think is important to note is that soft, receptive course that we saw for the first 2 years is likely to be the same exact scenario this time around. And I don't know if it's just that time of year in McKinney. Every year it's going to rain right around this time. But like clockwork, we get to the TPC Craig Ranch right here for the Byron Nelson week, and we're looking at soft, rainy conditions once again. So that high green regulation average, that high driving accuracy average that we just talked about, expect to see that same sort of scenario here for 2023. Few things to note, a bunch of bunkers. There's 83 bunkers on property. The rough is about 2.75 inches long. So because it is a Bermuda rough, that's slightly substantial. But like I said before, this really wasn't a driving heavy course in 2021 or 2023. The fairways are zoysia grass. We don't see that all that often, so just pointing that out. And then the greens, we're back to a regular bent grass surface, which we haven't seen for quite some time, but this tournament is kind of the delineator for when we start to see those summer grasses, when you get pure bent grass greens, when you get these bent grass greens that you'll see from time to time. You'll get pure POA this time of year. So rather than that POA trivalous overseed that we've seen for pretty much the last 2-3 months at this point, from here on out, you're going to see a lot of just plain bent grass surfaces for the next like month or so. Then afterwards, you're going to see a bunch of just pure Bermuda grass surfaces. So it's just due to the time of the year, we're moving into the summer months. So expect to see that on the PGA Tour schedule going forward. Alrighty, now let's take this thing hole by hole and get an idea of some of the shots these players will be facing. Hole number 1 is just 434. Actually, let's go back. Meant to hit next shot. It's relatively wide open tee shot. You've got like a 30-40 yard wide landing area in a green that isn't well protected, right? You've got bunkers to the left, so I guess a front left, back left pin location could get a little bit tricky if you do overcompensate and miss over there, but most of the pin locations to the back right, even a front right pin location, are going to be attacked by a majority of the field. So expect to see a bunch of birdies at hole 1. Hole 2 is a little bit more beefy, 468. It's straightforward, so it doesn't demand a fade. It doesn't demand a draw off the tee. Just, you know, your stock shape. You go out there, you'll bang into this fairway. You miss in the rough around here. Like I said, it is about a 3-inch Bermuda grass. Towards the end of the week, it'll probably be a little bit over a 3-inch Bermuda grass. So you don't want to miss in that stuff, but there's not a bunch of water, a bunch of trees to worry about, right? Distance control will be a little bit more difficult out of that rough, but if you hit it in the fairway, hole 2 could once again be a birdie look. Hole 3 is 428, hard dogleg from right to left, and you're not going to see anyone try and go over there. It just brings way too much risk into play. The shot that's like that 50-60 yard pitch shot isn't even all that much easier than the shot you're going to get from the fairway. When you hit it to the layup zone, you have a wide open angle into this green, into every pin location. I mean, given its shape, there's just nowhere really you can hide this pin, especially when you're hitting something like a pitching wedge, maybe even a 9-iron into it. So expect to see a lot of people putting for birdie there as well. Hole 4 is your first taste of a par 3, and like I said, the par 3s are a little bit more difficult here than pretty much every other hole. They're all real beefy, about 200 yards. This one's 218, slightly down the hill. You do have that cavernous bunker in front of the green complex. You miss long here. You pretty much are okay to every single pin. Maybe this back right pin, should say maybe like back middle. I don't even know what to call that little cove right there. Or this front right pin, you might get in a little bit of trouble going over, but to a majority of the locations, that's the miss on hole 4. Hole 5 is your first par 5. It is 576. You don't have to worry about the bunkers to the right if you're a bomber. If you're somebody that's more of an accuracy guy, well, make sure you hit this fairway, because if you do, you're going for this green in 2. There's a lot of incentive to just trying to bang it near the surface. Even if you don't hit the green, which is actually a little bit smaller for this par 5 than most greens around TPC Craig Ranch, this is where around the green comes into play. So a little bit surprising. This course has rewarded some of the better around the green players, and a lot of that's because of these around the green shots on the par 5. To be able to score, to be able to save par in a few of the difficult holes that you have around this track, it comes in handy. You've seen that in a lot of other Tom Weiskopf designs, like TPC Scottsdale, for example, for the Waste Management Phoenix Open, has a similar characteristic. Hole 6 is potentially drivable. This is one of the few holes where having that driving distance could benefit you, but a majority of players are going to lay up here. 361's a lot to ask for unless it's just completely downwind. So most likely a driver or a 3-wood, and then a wedge for most tour players. Your next par 3 is 232, another long iron shot. These par 3s are by far the most difficult holes on property, so you're just hoping to get it on the surface and 2-putt. Hole 8 is 484, another beefy hole. So like I said, there are a few difficult holes to worry about where long irons come into play. It's not just the par 3s. It's not just those par 5s. Of count, especially now that we've changed par, hole 12 from a par 5 to a par 4, there's at least 4 of those long iron shots required. So 484, try and get it on the surface and 2-putt, and move on to the scoreable 9th, which is your last par 5 on the front. There's water in play to the left, but you'd really have to miss through the trees to get there. So you're more just trying to set up an angle into this green. If you miss too far to the right in this bunker, it's a 100% a layup. And even if you miss like in front of the bunker here, or even to the right of the bunker, you cannot hit it over these trees. They're towering, they're large oak trees, a forced layup. So you're more just trying to set up an angle here because it's only 558. I mean, even the shorter hitters on tour, they get it in the short stuff here. They're going to be able to at least go for it, which is a slightly risky shot. You have this little natural area in front of the green, a little creek. But if you get it up near the surface, just going to be about getting up and down and getting that birdie, which is, again, just another example of why around the green comes into play. If you're starting on the back nine, which half the field will be over the first 2 days, you get greeted with not so nice a start. I mean, first off, 12 is going to be changed, but 10, a 472-yard par 4, significantly more difficult than what you have at hole number 1. So another long iron shot. 11 is 456. So I would say like a average par 4 here. Not really as nasty as hole 10, but hole 12 here. This is the converted par 5. So what I've done is I've set it up how they're going to on tour. Ignore this tee box down here. A tee box is going to be where I have this target number 1. They're going to be teeing off from right here. That's about 490 yards. Your tee shot out here, I have it, let's see, 334 yards out there. So that would be like the longest drive that you'll see. Most of the drives I would imagine are going to be a little bit further back, right? This is 296 right here. So this would be like if you hit a 3-wood off the tee. So something in that range, right, is where you're going to expect most drives to end up. And you're still left with 200 yards to maybe 170, 165 yards in. So it's going to be a beefy hole. The longer players are still going to have a mid-iron in. And because of how narrow the surface is, and they may make the fairway a little larger, right, because it's going to be a par 4 this time around, because this is going to be the landing area off the tee as opposed to the layup zone as what it was for the par 5. It's still going to be a difficult hole. You're still going to have to hit a long iron to a green that's well protected. So yeah, might very likely be the most difficult hole on property. Hole 13 is 501, another long iron shot. So like I said, this course is scoreable, but you're going to have to be able to hit those mid to long irons well. It's just another example of that. Hole 14 is 332. The water to the left really dissuades people from going for the green. Also, some of the bunkers here are a lot more penal than the rest on property. So most players here will just pitch it up in front of the green and leave themselves a little around the green shot, which is, again, another example of why around the green was so important over the first 2 years. It's one of those nuanced courses where the scoreable holes, you're going to be left with a lot of those 40 to 50 yard chips, which are tricky, and they fall into that around the green category in terms of shots gained. Your next par 3, 215, you got water in front of it. Again, it's just long iron shot. Like I know it sounds like a broken record at this point, but that's what we've got here. Hole 16, 492, another long par 4. Told you I'd say it again. Hole 17, 173. This, believe it or not, is your shortest par 3. So of the par 3s, this is the one that you can make birdie on, but it is a awkwardly shaped green, so you definitely got to hit a good approach shot. And then you're finishing off with a par 5. This is not converted. This will be a par 5. It does have the creek just in front of the green, which any mishit long iron shot or wood very well could end up in that creek. Everything slopes down to it as well. But another scoreable opportunity. If you lay up, you're going to be left with like an 80, 90 yard shot. And if you go for it, you're likely just trying to get up and down for a birdie, which once again shows the importance of that around the green play. Now that we've seen the golf course, let's go through our key metrics for the week to identify our top plays. And number 1, we've got shots gained approach, which is pretty much almost always going to be at number 1, but long irons are the name of the game. Whether it's those long par 3s, whether it's the plethora of long par 4s that we have on property, the players that can stick it from 175 to 200 or 200 to 225, or even I'd say the 150 to 175 yard range are going to be the players that you're really looking for here. So not a surprise there. It's almost always there at number 1, the most predictive stat when we have, when it comes to golf betting, and especially at this kind of course where you're going to have a ton of long irons. Next up, we've got shots gained putting on bent grass. Last year, almost all of the top players gained prolifically on the greens and got extremely streaky with it. They were making those 10 to 20 footers, and because of how flat the surfaces are at this course, you're going to see separation with the putting. Whoever can go out there and, like I said, get red hot with that putter is likely going to find themselves in contention. So not a surprise to find that at number 2. When we have Birdie Fest, that's usually usually going to be the case. And of course, because the surface of the week is bent grass, that's why I'm trying to specialize on those specialists. And lastly, we've got birdie or better percentage, which is always important when it comes to fantasy scoring, but especially when we're looking at outrights this week, you've got to consider it more than you would at most, because when you're getting to something like 20 to maybe 25 under par winning a golf tournament, which I think we could still see 25 under par winning this, right? It's only quote unquote 1 stroke harder per round, but they're also taking those 60 yards off. So I think 23, 24 under par is well within the cards with receptive greens. So birdie or better percentage, making sure that we can take players that can actually get to 25 under par, make 20 to 25 birdies is going to be important there as well. So I'm looking for aggressive players that go out there and light it up with the scoring, but also shots gained around the green. We talked about that importance, especially statistically over the first 2 years. We also looked at some of those around the green shots that may be required on scoreable holes. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at par 5 scoring. Also trying to take a look at just shots gained at easy golf courses. I think that's a good comp to make here. Taking a look at shots gained around the green and Bermuda grass. The rough here is that Bermuda rough. So trying to look at maybe some approach numbers out of that Bermuda rough as well. Just to get an idea of the type of guys we're expecting to play well at this course. And then finally, we're also looking at our comp courses, the similar tracks around the PGA Tour that play similar to what you get here at Craig Ranch, which we'll get into right now. I'm absolutely loving our comps this week. We've got 3 courses that I think are going to play extremely similar to what we have this week. And number 1, we've got TPC Twin Cities. That is the home of the 3M Open, a course with bent grass greens. It's a long par 71 in that 7,400 to 7,500 yard range, which this year, right, is the same as what we're getting at the Byron Nelson. But on top of that, you've got a course that prioritizes your long iron play, also some of your driving accuracy over your distance. So a lot of parallels to be made there. The agronomy is similar. It's a similar time of year, albeit the 3M Open like a month and a half from now, but still, you know, right there during those summer months. So taking a look at that, and then some of the crossover on the leaderboards. You've seen a lot of ball strikers find success at the 3M Open, and given the amount of long iron shots around the Byron Nelson, I'm expecting to see that same kind of story here. So you're looking for elite level ball striking combined with elite level putter, or at least the ability to get really hot with the putter at both courses. Next up, you've got TPC Deer Run, another bent grass course, real easy course this time of year. A little bit shorter than what you have this week at the Byron Nelson. Not as many long iron shots required, but still from the agronomy perspective, from the winning score perspective, a lot of crossover to be had. And around the green is also really important at Deer Run, which is one of those, you know, unique little niches that we have here around this course. And finally, we have Detroit Golf Club. That'll be at number 3, the home of the Rocket Mortgage Classic. That is a bent grass course. I believe it's a par 72, not a par 71, but relatively lengthy, right around 74, 7,500 yards. A lot of the same kind of iron shots required around both tracks, long par 3s. So the agronomy, winning score, from the iron distribution perspective, a lot of crossover as well. Another one of those courses and tournaments that I'm using for my correlation. If you're looking at anything else, I think look at easy courses, right? We talked about that with the key metrics. If you look at just some of the top 5, top 10 scoring courses last year, you're going to find a lot of crossover between those leaderboards and then what you're likely to see this week, as there's an art form to going low, right? It's why we're looking for high birdie percentage players, guys that take apart those par 5s. You have to be the kind of guy that can get hot, right? Can go out there and make 6, 7 birdies in a round, because that's what's required to get to 20 to 25 under par in the optimal lineup on DFS, or to get up there in the top 5, top 10 for your outright bets. That's all for the TPC Craig Ranch preview. Hopefully you guys feel a little bit more prepared for this week's contest. Before you're hopping out of here, go ahead, let me know what you think the winning score is going to be. You know, obviously with the change to a par 71, I'm going to go ahead and take 22 under par. I think that's probably the sweet spot, but I could really see anything from 25 down to like maybe 18 under par winning, but would love to hear your thoughts down below on that. And of course, before you hop on out of here, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss any of that content in the future. We'll have core plays dropping this afternoon, value plays, fades, and sleepers, our weekly live stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. You guys know the deal at this point. We'll be covering everything you need to know, both from the fantasy and betting perspective heading into lock, to make sure that you guys can go out there and crush this weekend. So I'm looking forward to it. Make sure you comment that winning score down below, your thoughts along with it, and I'll catch you guys next time for the Core Plays video.